Up next, we will welcome on stage our keynote speaker, Vinandy. Pitt is actually also a former laureate of the National Jonk Fuerscher contest from the 1980s. He was also able to mix his interest for science with music to create engaging performances under the name Cyberpiper. Please welcome Pitt with a big round of applause.
Hello. Hi, it's working. Hello, my name is Pitt Vinandy. I'm very honored to have been invited to this competition, to this ceremony. Yeah. So, let's move on with this. It's working. Come on, maybe I have to go closer to the to the computer for it to work. Maybe I just say next slide and you advance it because this is not working. That gives me one hand free. Okay, next slide. Yeah, that's manual work. Okay, 1980. As you can see, there was 5 projects in that year. I was really surprised to see 57 today, and it really shows the evaluation since 1980 at least. Yeah. So I did 2 projects, and you can already do the next slide. The first one was with a friend called Andre Altman. Together we constructed a solar collector, an optical solar collector to produce hot water. The idea was that we wanted to construct something not for professionals, but that anybody could kind of like amateurs could also construct, so to provide themselves with boiling water. Yeah, something for the people to make themselves. Next slide. Yeah, and here you can see the result. So we used components that could be easily bought. We used Fischer Technik for the electronic components at the time because that was easy to come by and it was reliable. Next slide. And this is the result. Yeah, we managed to make the water hot enough to make tea with it or coffee. So we actually got 100 degrees water. Next slide. And the second project I did by myself, that was about ear wings of trees, and we collected different trees, next slide, from different areas of Luxembourg. I had a total of 3 samples. I had to call the forester and say, can I have a piece of tree, please? That has been cut down. Next slide. We only show 2 here, and the next slide already. All right, and at the laboratory where I worked, this is a gas chromatograph. Yeah, that was the machine that we used then to determine the amount of metals that could be found in those rings, especially heavy metals, but also other metals. And by that analysis, it allowed us to see the history of the tree. Like if the tree was near a factory that was built in 1940, well, we could see that certain levels of metals would go up. Right, and we had some which were next to the train, and so we could see a bit of history. That was kind of like, I had kind of fascination for history, and this was a way of finding out about history by the means of a tree. Next slide. Okay, this was the results we got. That's what they looked like. It was on paper. Those were the graphs that we read our results from. And the next slide. So this is the National Laboratory of Luxembourg, or it was at the time when I worked there. Of course, they have moved since then. This was in Bonnevoie, in the Verlorenkost. Yeah, that's where I worked at the time when I did these things. I was a laboratory assistant, and I was in the ATM program, Assistant Technique Médicale, actually learning. Like I went to school once a week, and it was like almost like an internship. It was a little bit paid already, but well, I started my routine of work expecting to stay there all my life. Actually, I was doing routine analysis of vegetables. Cutting up vegetables and finding out how much pesticides were in them and see if they were conform to be sold. I got a bit bored, I must say, because I became a chemist because I was interested in science. And science for me meant research and creativity in research. And my parents couldn't afford to send me to university, so I just became a laboratory assistant, bound to do. I must say, I was a bit bored. I repaired the machines in the laboratory when they were broken, or sometimes I also I speeded up the process of my analysis. It took 5 days in the beginning, and when I was done, it took 2 days. But apart from that, I took some bad decisions as well, like, you know, Breaking Bad movie? I worked in a laboratory, and there was all kinds of chemicals, and unfortunately, I decided to experiment on myself with some of these substances. Thank God I'm out of that now. I mean, but it ended my career as a laboratory assistant. Next slide. So I took to the street and traveled over Europe for 10 years, played on the street. Then coming back to Luxembourg, I played in different bands. We have Clan Rock, Heartlands, Lumperkrämer, and there's a lot more. Next slide. For about 10 years, I worked on different films. There was a big period. There was a lot of films made in Luxembourg. I worked on Jewels, One Against the Wind, and many more. I couldn't show them all. On the last film, An American Werewolf in Paris, I could finally do what I wanted to do, a bit more scientific again, work on the special effects department. And that's what I always wanted to do. But actually, that was the last film I worked on. Next slide. Yeah, and because I got into puppet production, I had been doing that already before in my early life, puppet shows for children. And I stopped with the films because I produced a puppet theater series for RTL, for the TV, when they started to have their daily program as opposed to the once-a-week Sunday program. We did the Sandman program. And later I took over the Bimbo Theater, which I grew up with, and I was very honored to continue that. And Puppet Theater Hoppla Bum is what came out of the TV series. This picture was taken during COVID, when we streamed the puppet shows every day for the people outside, and with my lovely daughter Lilu, who is also here. Next slide. Yeah, and all that led me, to cut it short, I mean, the story is a lot longer, I could write a book about it, to Cyberpiper, yeah. I was playing bagpipes, and I was also known as the Rattenfänger, we say, the Pied Piper of Hamelin, playing on the street. And one night I thought, well, I was interested in minimalistic electronic music, and I thought, I want to do something that combines folk music with electronic music. Again, that we have history in there. So I created this character called the Cyberpiper. And it was all because of these glasses. I saw these glasses at an optician, and they cost 10,000 francs at the time. That's 250 euros. And I thought, well, I really want those. So I had to find an excuse. So Cyberpiper started up with those glasses, actually. Next slide is, you can press twice, a little video that shows Cyberpiper.
My lady, my heart it bleeds, since I saw you walking down the dark streets. Fare thee well, my heart it bleeds. Farewell, my love, down the dark street. Farewell, my love.
And off you go. Come on, let's go to the show. Let the animations flow.
so you're not alone here. Friends all around, there's music. Come on, dance to the sound, get creative. But there's much to learn, you might even find some love.
And fly away to a new world, just to be what you wanna be. Let's fly away to a new world, to a life of liberty.
Yeah, Cyberpiper. So the animations were really bad on that last bit. That was in Second Life. So through Cyberpiper, I got into virtual worlds. Second Life was just coming out big, and I thought, well, if I'm called Cyberpiper, I need to pipe in a cyber world, in cyberspace. So I went into Second Life and played many concerts. Next slide. Yeah. Then in between, now, a later project just to hook up to the solar collector. We have a project, it's called Liminaries. Liminaries, it is called, that means a stepping stone. It is like a step towards a new world or a new dimension. Okay, next slide. And actually, Liminaries is a ship, or will be a ship. This is the ship, how I found it. It's called UU2, im Falle eines Falles. Huh? Voilà. It was in the north of Germany, and we bought it for 8,000 euros, which was fair price. The ship is 100 years old and weighs 21 tons, and made totally of steel. And next slide. Shows the trip when we went to pick up the ship. So the bikes were going faster than us. I was oiling the, yeah. That was on the wine already. It was an exciting trip, but it ended in Cologne because the engine broke down. Then I was towed away by a big coal transporter to a little bit further down to the Mosel, and then when I was on the Mosel, I couldn't have it towed until Luxembourg. That was too far, so I had to load it on a truck a month later and bring it to Luxembourg. So this ship is to be a floating puppet theater. So an artistic project. We want to travel with it and play puppet shows on the ship on the subject of water, legends about water and stuff like that. But it's not only an artistic project, but it's also an ecological and scientific project. Next slide. Because we want it to be completely independent. We want it to run on solar power. Next slide. And it will have hydrogen fuel cell and, of course, electric engine, water recycling, anything so that the ship will be completely sustainable and completely, independent. So, and for that we are trying to right now raise funds with the European Commission, or also on a national level. We'll start to. I'm writing the project right now to raise funds for this, and that come back to the project of Jonk Fuerscher in 1980. That was my first project that I had to write, and we wrote on a typewriter. I wrote with 2 fingers because I couldn't type with all my hands. So nowadays, when we want to write a project, we have ChatGPT. I mean, we have come a long way. I could almost write the project on my phone. I mean, incredible. Okay, next slide. Then back to another volley, history. History was in one of the projects of young scientists in 1980. I got into Second Life because of Cyberpiper. And after a while, playing music there wasn't enough. I started building things. And we reconstructed a part of Luxembourg of 1867. Also a short video. It's a little bit longer, but it avoids me talking too much. And I'm talking on the video anyway. So there you go, next.
We are actually in the real fort, and we're in the same place in Second Life. Under the tunnels, the mines, we turn off the electricity so that we have petrol lamps and we walk through those tunnels. In one of the towers we have a computer room. We sit around like the knights of the round table. We try and get into a kind of role play. At one point there's no more instructions and we just see what's going to happen. My name in Second Life is Cyber Piper, but now I'm more often known as Hauptmann Weidert. We built a simulation of the Fort Tüngen in its version of 1867. The characters, the soldiers, the uniforms, the weapons and everything that was in it. Local people from here, they can discover their own history, but also tourists, because we can use these characters to tell the story. They travel back in time.
1867 was a very important year.
There was a big crisis all over Europe.
The Emperor of France wanted to buy Luxembourg.
The British called a conference in London.
They came to an agreement that Luxembourg would become totally independent.
In order to prevent a war between Germany and France.
Part of the treaty was to demolish the fortress.
Up to that point, the city was locked up at night. You weren't allowed to go out. There was hardly any culture. And then it started growing. Both culture, commerce, and inventions were starting. The beginning of our modern age as we know it now. When they decided to demolish the fortress of Luxembourg, Hauptmann Weidert decided to measure it and to construct a plaster model of the whole fortress. That model and other historical photos and maps were the basis for our recreation in Second Life. In Second Life, you have already the possibility to build things with the engine that's inside Second Life. So you can just put out a cube, you can stretch it, you can put holes in it, you can put out a cylinder, transform it, cut it. Now we have the possibility, of course, to import anything from an outside 3D building program in the shape of meshes. We use Blender and we do the textures with photo programs like Photoshop. Digging into that period gave us the idea to build the whole city of Luxembourg, as it's fairly small as compared to other world cities. So we started to build the next suburb in virtual reality, the Pfaffenthal. And although the accurate modeling, the construction of the project, the detailed textures are very important, this virtual Pfaffenthal really comes to life because people start to move in and they start getting settled there. Kind of like what happened in the real life of 1867. People can discover history by living in it. The Luxembourg City Museum, which is hosting our exhibit, has 10 regular computers with avatars that are already logged in and ready for visitors to explore. And we also have 2 Oculus Rift stations. I have people from all walks of life and all ages. Some are a bit scared, some say they never have anything to do with computers, but then usually they learn it pretty fast. Virtual reality does not have to be a way to cut yourself off from the real world. The big promise of virtual reality is that it can connect us with reality in a different way. I think it should be part of the future of museums. I think that every museum should have things like that. If it's a natural museum, people should be able to travel to the jungle or go under the water to discover natural life. If it's a museum about science, people should be able to travel to Mars and walk around on Mars. The point of this project is not to replace traditional history books or history courses, but just to give people a feeling of what life was back then. Children relate to this very well because they can learn history in a very playful way. As adults, we can learn from them. We can participate in shaping this story, and Second Life is the center of it.
Down here, my daughter just asked me, we're going to go down there and see the horses, because she's used to going into Second Life with me. It looks exactly the same, and so she's asking for the horses.
That's the power.
Right, that was the project. I'm not done. Of course, we all know where virtual reality went. I mean, virtual reality with headsets and all that. We kind of build on that, and we wanted to continue, but we are not. The world is not ready for virtual reality, or virtual reality is maybe not ready for the world. But we continued our projects. Next slide. We continued anyway. We decided to continue to develop educational games for children on the Roblox platform. The Roblox platform is a very good platform for kids because it's really protected. Most of you young people probably know it very well. You can run the slide, next slide, and on the film. I can keep talking. So I work with Nigel Shelton in England, who is a math teacher, who I've never met in real life, and a young student from Israel called Tom Yeager. He's a programmer, and together we built these games. And this is the same one that you saw in the other film, but now in Roblox, but not as a virtual world, but as a computer game. Which, in the meantime, also works with Oculus Quest, so virtual reality is still there. You can use it, but the nice thing about this platform is that it works really, really well on mobile phone. And most children today play on mobile phones or tablets. So that was one of the reasons we switched to this platform at the time. So again, Pfaffenthal. We also managed to combine gameplay with puppet shows. I mean, all kinds of different things going on that we can use this for. Next slide. And so finally, the very last video and the very last slide. We got 3 years ago. We started on the Castle of Vianden, Les Amis du Château. They asked us, and with the support of the Ministry of Culture, to do a project in Roblox on the Castle of Vianden in 1485. Here we go. Which was very complex. I thought it would take 6 months, but it took almost 2.5 years now. There the music is very low, I don't know why. So we are still developing it, it's in beta. We're still finalizing the gamification of it. The modeling is now pretty much finished, as you can see. There you can buy a horse. So these are the kind of things we still have to program and make work. The jousting, for example, we have mini games in the games where kids can, of course, also joust and fight, but you also have to eat and drink and do regular jobs like baker or miller or whatever to earn money and to advance in the game. Right, and I'm going on this battle of introducing computer games and things like that in schools and in daycare centers and stuff like that. I work in a daycare center myself. It's still a little battle because a lot of people are quite critical towards this kind of thing, but I think it's very important, and I thank you very much, and I wish much success to all the students who the young people who presented projects here.